Hello, Dave here. Welcome to Learn JavaScript with me. This is the third exercise in Chapter 11. And Chapter 11 is Ajax. And in this specific exercise, where the new concept is that the Ajax object is available as part of the event object target property, or that's what that target, the event object target points to, and that's what we're going to see in the code here. And basically we're covering, creating the Ajax object, sending the data, and actually executing it, but then utilizing the response text pointing to it from the event object. So in the background, the book we're working on is Modern JavaScript, Develop and Design. The author is Larry Ullman. You can find out more information about the book at laryullman.com. And out here, davecoast.com, I have a post that has a link to our work area, js.davecoast.com, a little subdomain. That's also what this Learning JavaScript nav bar will take you to, the same place. I have a link to laryullman.com, and also all of the code so far can be downloaded from this link here. If you hit continue reading, brings up the rest of the post, and there is the playlist with our videos on it. So going over to just another tab, and I notice that I'm at js.davecoast.com. In fact, I can go back to the beginning there, js.davecoast.com. Comes up with all these exercises. This is available. Come on out here, debug away. All the exercises are out here. And each chapter so far that I've worked on, we're up to chapter 11, has their exercises. This is the third one regarding Ajax right here. And here's our form that we'll be using for this demonstration. The general idea of this form is that a visitor would come, enter their name and their email address, and enter some comments. Here are some comments in a text area. This would get passed to the PHP script, and the PHP script would go ahead and send an email that this individual had these individual comments. Now, because don't have all those features turned on, we're not worried about how PHP works here. We're looking at the Ajax of passing this data to the PHP script and getting some kind of response back. And that's the scope of these book exercises. So when I click the button, here I get this information back from the PHP file showing that it received my name, email address, and whatever comments I entered, and I just return them back from the screen. How we actually access that is the purpose of this lesson. So let's bring up the code. So we have 4 files: the HTML, 2 JavaScript files, and our PHP file. If we go back to the HTML, you'll see that it includes the 2 JavaScript files. One creates the Ajax object, and the other one actually processes this page. Going on, let's go to the main JavaScript file. Here's the meat of the code that we're working on. Let's go down to the bottom here. Notice the window.onload anonymous function is where we start based on the window being loaded. Our first executable statement, we create a variable, and that variable creates the Ajax object. And we use this file here to actually create that object so we don't have to type this code over and over again. Once again, if it's older IE, it creates this ActiveX object and has to pass this argument. Otherwise, for the rest of the world, we use the XML HTTP request method and create a new HTTP request object, and that's our Ajax object. So going back to our, so we create that object here, right? We're just, the window has just been loaded, just been unloaded. The window has just been loaded. We create an Ajax object. We haven't done anything with it yet. Then our Ajax object, we use the onReadyStateChange event listener, and if that event happens, we execute the handle Ajax response function. Now notice that this is a named function, and if we look up here, here's that function, and we pass the event object E as an argument. This is the key of this lesson. So let's go down through the code and wait till we get back up there. But everything else is kind of standard fluff. The key is what we do up here with the event object. So here's our onReadyStateChange event listener. Then we do an onSubmit event listener for the actual form and execute this anonymous function. Down here, this is cute, good, packaging the file, the data together to send, but it's standard for loop and concatenation of strings. Nothing fancy happening here. Then we go ahead and set up the Ajax request using the post method, specifying the PHP file. And we have that PHP file here. We'll look at that in a few moments. And we set the synchronous asynchronous flag to true, which says do this asynchronously in the background. So our next Ajax object method is the setRequestHeader, where we tell it the content type that we're going to pass, and it's basic text with the URL encoding. Anyway, a content type header. So you have to tell it, ooh, what are we actually sending? Then we actually execute the Ajax request with the send method, and we send the data. And again, this is just getting fancy with how these key value pairs are put together. So this is just a standard join. So each of these pairs that we've hard coded here together, and we'll see what they actually look like a little bit in debugger. But again, this is nothing new happening here. Standard programming type of stuff, just doing a join. So each of these array values will be separated with the and sign. And that's how the data needs to be formatted to be sent along as part of the post method. So once we issue this send, which is the actual request, our onReadyStateChange should trigger and send us to execute the statements in the handle Ajax response function, which is up here, and we pass it this event object. So if E is undefined, Then we set it to the window event, which is for IE. Then we create a variable called Ajax Response Work, and it is set to either e.target or e.source element. And again, based on whether or not e.target is an actual value. So if the event object for non-old IE world exists, this e.target points to or is a reference to the actual Ajax object. And since when we created this Ajax object down here, this Ajax object variable does not exist in this function because it's locally scoped. And this is the whole purpose of this lesson, is that when we handle this onReady state change and it calls a function, we have a reference to our variable or our object through the event target property. Okay, so that's the key point. So once we set it up, and if it's old IE, it's the source element property. Otherwise, it is the e.target property. Then we go through some standard if statement stuff here to see, has the request been completed? If it has been completed, was it successful? If it was successful, then we're going to take the response text from the PHP file and just plunk it out on the screen. And that's kind of being very simplistic because we're not actually doing real PHP activity here. We're just showing that our data has been passed to the PHP script. The PHP script can do what it needs to do, and that a response from the PHP script is sent back to the JavaScript here. If it's not successful, we actually submit the form. So that's the default browser behavior. And since we're all done, we go ahead and set the HTTP or the Ajax request object. We go ahead and set that to null to reset. Let's take a quick look at the PHP here. Again, this is just for demo purposes. Just created some header information. If we look out here, notice, right, I just got a goofy header that it came from the PHP file, and I just show the actual data values to prove that this data got all the way to the PHP file and all the way back. Let me bring the code back up here. So here's the code, and if, right, it's gonna be sent in this associative array $_post, and we have our 3 index values. Notice that, oops, come back here. When we set up this for loop, that it is setting it up based on name ID, 1, 2, 3, name ID, email ID, and comments ID, which are the elements from the screen. Or here's the actual ID, the name ID, email ID, comments ID. And that's so that back here we can use that here to actually get the value of what's in that field. And there's 3 of them. So in PHP, we're going to get, in the post array, we're going to get these indexes, associative indexes. And so if they are set, we're going to just formatting some silly data here. Comments received, just putting it around the actual variable, right? Do that for all 3 of them. And just echo that back so that we see those values here. And so here's the code for files. Here's the JS. Let's take a quick buzz through in Firebug to see how it actually works. Let's start by resetting the screen. So I'm going to come back up here, go back to my exercises, click on my Ajax 3 exercise. I have a blank screen. I'm going to turn on Firebug, and we see it down here. I'll detach that so I can make it a little more visible. It starts out in script showing the HTML. So I click on that button up there, brings up all of the files. I go to my JavaScript file. Here's my JavaScript. I can set breakpoints. I'm going to set a breakpoint at the first executable statement in our handle Ajax response function. I'm going to set a breakpoint in the first executable statement in the window.onload anonymous function, and I believe that's all I need to set. I guess I should also turn one on here in the first executable statement in our onSubmit when the button is pushed function. So 3 breakpoints, good to go. Let's put some data out here. I'm going to type a name in here. So demo, or let's just do video name. Email is video.name@testing.com, and this text should go to the PHP script and then return. And I'll press the button, although I really want to, I apologize for that, I really want to refresh this screen so that we stop at the window.onload and we see that piece there, kind of jump the gun. But anyway, so I refreshed. Here's window.onload. First thing we need to do is create that Ajax object. I hit step. We go into the Ajax object function, right? This external file. That was one of the other files that I had out there. And I step through that. It actually creates it. Again, it creates it with the new XML HTTP request object because it is not an older version of IE. It's Firefox. I step, then I return back. I step down again, so now I have an XML HTTP request object, and I've placed that object in a variable, or I assigned that object to the variable Ajax onload work. Then I step again, and I turned on an onReady state change event handler. And click down through, we set an onSubmit event handler, so 2 event handlers, and created an Ajax object. So I step one more time. Now we're back to the screen. I don't have to enter these again. It stayed in there. So now I hit the button, and I just wanted us to see how the window onload happens. So now when I hit the button, it hits the onSubmit event handler. Makes sense. I just hit the submit button. And now we go ahead and set up those fields into key value pairs. Here's our keys, right? And we have another, so we created a variable, right? And that array has 3 entries in it: name ID, email ID, and comments ID. I create another variable called combine data to send. And now we go through a loop for each of these fields in our list and set up the data. So let me bop down here and go through the first one, right? So now I've bumped up the counter. Well, it hasn't bumped it up yet till it hits this again. But now in combine data to send, you see I have name ID equal video name. And the %20 there is just the space, right, in the URL encoding. So there's the first entry. Let's keep stepping. Now, if I check this out, notice it bumped it up to 1. And we'll bop through it again and again. So there's our third time, right? I is 2. It's about to bop that up to 3 and kick out. But if we look at this combined data to send, you see that we have our 3 key value pairs set up out there. Let's hit step. And now we go ahead and do our Ajax open, which is prepping our Ajax object. It triggers the onReady state change. And if we look at the ready state, it's a 1, just because that's the open. We didn't actually send the request yet. So that's why we're not doing anything, and that's why we're checking for 4, which means it was actually completed. Then we set the request header. And now we're going to actually do our send. So I step, we do the send, and we get intercepted here, right? And the event is ready state change. So this onReady state change was triggered. We execute this function. We have this object E, ready state change. It's not undefined. So now we can create E.target is pointing. Notice that there's our XML HTTP request object, our Ajax object. So I hit step. It sets that. Now our ready state, it is equal to 4. So we execute that statement. Our status is 200, successful. So we go ahead and send this response text. Notice what that response text is. See that there's all of our values in there. And we can see most of it. I could bring it up over here, right? And here's our response text. That's what we're actually going to display. So this showed that it got all the way over to the PHP file and all the way back. Also, down here, let me go ahead and just scrunch that back up. Down here, we have our networking monitor, right? If we hit net over here, it shows here's our request. But let me come back to script in our console here. Here's our post. I'll open that up. Here's the headers that we sent. Here's the actual post associative array. Here's our 3 fields and the 3 values. And here's it encoded. This is how we actually sent that data along. And here's the response from the PHP file, which is, let me bring this guy back up here. This echo, right, it's returning all these strings, which is just a bunch of data we got together, but at least we are showing what we received in the post associative array. So let's go back here. Sorry, let me flop through these screens, bring this guy back on top. So now we're going to go ahead and set this text into the HTML. I hit click, the data is out there. You see that the data is out there. Video name, video.name at testing.com. This text should go to the PHP script and then return, as it has. Right? Then we go ahead and clear out the Ajax object because we're done with it, and end. And there's our file. That's how it works. The key piece of this lesson is right here on the onReadyStateChange, the actual event object, its target is a reference to the Ajax object. And that's the key of this lesson. Thank you very much for watching. Questions or comments, please leave it on the video and/or contact me, Dave at davecoast.com. Thank you.